economic policies and concluded that over the last 7 years we've made great progress. That's what John McCain said. Now, he must not be talking to Ida. He's not talking to the 260,000 people who've lost their jobs since the beginning of this year. He's not talking to all those people without health insurance. He's not talking to folks out in Indian country and the reservations. He's not talking to all the people who are at risk of losing their homes because of this foreclosure crisis, because nobody was overseeing and regulating the mortgage market. He's not talking to young people who can't afford to go to college because financial aid is drying up. I don't know who John McCain's talking to, but you don't see great progress, and I don't see great progress, and that's why we can't let John McCain make any progress toward the White House. We are going to make sure we don't have 4 more years of George Bush's economic policy. Not just on economic policy he wants to continue George Bush's policies. He wants to continue the same foreign policy of George Bush. You know, this past week, President Bush's own former spokesperson, Scott McCloud, reminded us of how we got to where we are in Iraq. The president hyped the threat from Saddam Hussein before the war and made false promises about progress after it began. He accused anybody who disagreed with his position of being for, quote, surrender. And when he was presented with facts that went against his views, we all know this president refused to admit that he'd made a mistake. That's the leadership that we've had enough of over the last 8 years. That's why we need a change in Washington. Now, fast forward, John McCain, for the last few weeks, he's been attacking me saying I've got, quote, no knowledge to make decisions. Even though I made the right decision based on the right knowledge about why we should go into Iraq in the first place, before the war began. And John McCain was arguing for an invasion of a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. I argued that the war in Iraq would set back our ability to destroy Al-Qaeda and capture bin Laden and the terrorists who were responsible for 9/11. I said it was going to be a distraction from Afghanistan. I warned that the invasion would fan Islamic extremism and lead to an occupation of undetermined length at undetermined costs with undetermined consequences. That was my judgment, and that's where we find ourselves today. And Senator McCain insisted again just the other day that our policy is succeeding in Iraq, and to make his case he said, quote, we have drawn down to pre-surge levels. That's what he said. This is the guy who said I had no knowledge. John McCain was wrong. And he was wrong on the most important question that any commander-in-chief faces. We've not drawn down to pre-surge levels. We have about 20,000 more troops in Iraq today than we had before the surge. Even after we finish rotating more troops out later this summer, we'll still have thousands more of Americans in Iraq than we did before the surge. Those are the facts. And we all misspeak sometimes. I've done it myself. So on this basic factual error, you'd think John McCain would just say, you know, I misspoke, I made a mistake, and move on. But he couldn't do that. Instead, he dug in. And the disturbing thing is we've seen this movie before. A leader who pursues the wrong course, who's unwilling to change course, who ignores the evidence. Now, just like George Bush, John McCain is refusing to admit that he's made a mistake, and that's exactly the kind of leadership that has got us fighting for 5 years in a war that we shouldn't have authorized, and we should not have waged. We don't need more leaders who can't admit they've made a mistake, even about something as fundamental as how many young people are serving in harm's way. We don't need more spin about the surge that was supposed to get the Iraqis to step up. We don't need any more spin about how the surge is succeeding in doing what it was supposed to do, which is get the Iraqis to stand up and take responsibility for their own future so we can start bringing our troops home. We don't need more tough talk from George Bush or John McCain, because the Taliban's still fighting in Afghanistan. The terrorists who hit us on 9/11 are still at large. We don't need more leaders who just see what they want to see in Iraq. It's time to recognize where we are in Iraq. The American people will have a clear choice in November. When the new president takes office, it will be almost 6 years into the Iraq War. John McCain wants to keep that war going indefinitely. It has already cost us hundreds of billions of dollars, will soon cost us trillions of dollars. It has cost us thousands of lives. Thousands of more have been maimed and injured. I want to restore our military. I want to finish the fight in Afghanistan. I want to renew our leadership in the world. And that is why I'm going to be open and honest and straight with the American people. And I'm going to end this war in Iraq. Let me just say one final point, and that is, if we're going to bring about real change, we've got to change how politics is done in Washington. That means no more letting special interests set the agenda. That's why at the beginning of this campaign I said I would not take money from PACs, I would not take money from federal lobbyists. I have not taken a dime from them. They will not run our White House. They will not drown out the voices of the American people when I am President of the United States of America. And just like we need to be straight and honest with the American people about war, we need to be straight about our economic policies and some of the challenges that our folks face. Because we don't have we don't want any more political gimmicks. We want our leadership to work hard to solve hard problems. Let me give you an example, this gas tax holiday. You remember John McCain said, I'm going to give you a gas tax holiday. That's how we're going to help Ida. Well, it turns out that the gas tax is about 5% of what you pay at the pump. So at best, you would save 30 cents a day for 3 months for a grand total of $28. Now, that is assuming that the oil companies would actually lower their prices once the gas tax was suspended. How many people think the oil companies would actually lower their prices? They would put those profits right in their pockets. So this wasn't a real solution, and I said so. I said, I'm not going to play that game. Just try to get myself through the next election. Here's what we've got to do. First of all, we've got to give the middle class a real tax break. Not tax breaks for corporations like John McCain's proposed, but tax breaks for ordinary Americans making $75,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $30,000 a year. You need relief, and that's why I've said we are going to offset the payroll tax so that the average working family can get an extra $1,000 in their pocket every year. Senior citizens, if you make less than $50,000, we're going to eliminate your taxes completely on Social Security. With that tax break, Ida could teach next year at Pine Ridge.